This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Megan Voisin in Suffield, Michael Brown in Hartford, Jaylene Gonzalez in East Windsor, and Raekwon McLean in Hamden. They were all walking when they were hit and killed by cars in the last year. In fact, pedestrian deaths in the state have more than doubled since 2011. Coming up Where We Live, we hear from the Connecticut Department of Transportation about the rise in pedestrian deaths. Earlier this month, a pedestrian on a sidewalk was killed in West Hartford Center. Police identified him as 61-year-old Bob O'Neill. That crash is still under investigation. In a few minutes, West Hartford's town engineer joins us to talk about the town's efforts to slow traffic between Bishop's Corner and West Hartford. Do you feel safe walking where you live? You can join us, 888-720-9677. That's 888-720-WNPR. You can share a comment on our Facebook page and find us on Twitter at Where We Live. So often these crashes are forgotten. Maybe it's a headline you see online or hear during a quick news story, but we can't forget that lives are changed in an instant. Just ask West Hartford resident Stephanie Marco Lance, who was hit by a driver in April 2017 while she was in a crosswalk. I talked with her recently about that day. Joining us now on Zoom is Stephanie Marco Lance. She's a West Hartford resident and she's a mixed media artist. Stephanie, welcome to our show.
Thank you for having me.
Starting off, how long have you been a West Hartford resident?
We have lived in West Hartford for 17 years now.
And you have a family?
We do. We have two children, 14 and 16.
And so it's a long time to live in West Hartford. And we wanted to ask you about a really traumatic thing that happened to you. I believe it was 5 years ago when you were hit by a car. Can you tell us what happened?
Well, it was a beautiful day during April break, April 11th. And we had the kids home from school, and we decided we'd walk into West Hartford Center to enjoy really a more spring-like day. And we had a lovely day. We went out to lunch, and we had our dog with us, and we were on our way back home. And honestly, we walk through traffic safety with the kids all the time, just because they were at that point of the age that they could start walking into the center on their own. We live about a mile from West Hartford Center. So I always remind them, wait till the walk signal's on, make sure you cross at the crosswalks. And we were at a crosswalk, at a red light in the middle of the walk cycle. And I'm like, okay, it's all safe. All the cars are stopped. And it was the corner of Farmington and Trout Brook Drive. And we started walking across all together. And there was one lane of traffic that no one was in. And all of a sudden there was a car just flying down the road. I saw the car flying down the road, kind of thinking, how is it possible they're going to stop at that red light? And they didn't stop at the red light. They just blew through the red light and hit me.
Wow. And then when that happened, there must have been so much that was going through your mind. Your kids, your husband, they were all in front of you. Had they already completed walking to the other side?
Thankfully, at that age for the kids, when they got about halfway across, they would kind of race each other across. So they got across much quicker than I did. And my husband was literally like a step ahead of me with our dog, like a step ahead of me, literally. And which was enough for him to not get hit by the car. But yeah, I saw the car coming straight at me, and I just thought, I am going to die right now. That was like, like in the movies, you see like the people that are about to get hit by a car and you're like, just jump out of the way. And there's just no time to jump out of the way. And so, yeah, my thought was, I'm going to die right now. And then my next thought was, I am not ready to die. And then everything just went black. And I definitely got hit bad.
So this was the corner of Farmington and Trout Brook. Can you describe that intersection for our listeners who may not be familiar with that part of West Hartford?
It is a very, very well-traveled, busy intersection in town. It's an intersection that we need to cross over to get into town. It's just our route we go. There's a gas station on one corner that people are coming in and out of. There's a funeral home on another corner. It's right by Whole Foods. It's just a very busy intersection. So honestly, it's an intersection I always remind my kids, make sure you watch out for the people turning right on red, make sure everyone's stopped. And it's just crazy that happened there.
And so what happened after the crash? I imagine you were hospitalized. What was your recovery?
Oh my gosh. Well, thankfully my husband does ski patrol and he's a first responder and he was very calm on the scene. This is what I hear because I obviously don't remember any of this. Being so close to the middle of town, the emergency response crews were there very quickly to help me. I do have a haunting sound whenever I hear sirens until this day, because I have that audio, I guess, ingrained in my head of the sirens coming. And I also recall like the feeling of the hot pavement on my back. But it's kind of like I don't really remember it. But yeah, Carl jumped into action to secure the scene, I think they call it in ski patrol lingo, and made sure, the person who hit me actually was still in drive. I hit the front bumper of the car, somehow launched into the front windshield with my head and like went almost like aerial, and then I got thrown like, I don't know, 16 feet or so, skidding across the pavement after. So it was like I almost got 3 hits in a way. And there were lots of witnesses because everyone else was sitting at a red light just watching what was going on. So anyway, yeah, so Carl made sure that the man put his car in park and turned it off because we didn't want him to continue going down the road. He had no idea that he had hit me. He was an elderly man who should not have been driving his car.
I'm so sorry to hear that happened to you, Stephanie. And so I'm talking to you 5 years later. Physically, you're doing okay, but what about psychologically, Stephanie? When something like this happens, how has that changed? Even with the comfort that you once had, feeling comfortable walking with your family in West Hartford
It
Center.
took me a long time to feel comfortable walking on a sidewalk. I still have PTSD from it. It's and I have a lot of trouble sleeping still. It's generally when I'm a passenger in the car, and I guess it's maybe psychologically like I don't have the control. My husband's a great driver, but like if someone comes and cuts us off, I overreact because of what happened. And excuse me, I don't like overreacting. It makes me very upset. And I never had sleep issues before. And I did get my medical marijuana card to help me sleep. And that does help very much. But yeah, and like I said earlier, the sirens are very triggering. So whenever I hear a siren go flying by, I'm like, all I could think is, gosh, I hope everybody's okay,
We're talking with you and playing this interview in an hour where we're focusing on pedestrian deaths in our state, more than doubling since 2011, and thinking not only about ways to for the state and for localities to address this issue, but I'm wondering, from your perspective as someone that was hit by a car and survived, when you think about the intersections in your town, What concerns do you have today? What do you want to see change?
Well, being that we're a big, big walking family, and as I said, our kids are walking all over the place now, especially at 14 and 16, they meet up with their friends in the center. I feel like I'm always like, okay, even if the light turns red, make sure everybody stops. Like, don't trust they're going to stop. I've just seen far too many people lately blowing red lights and not even stopping at stop signs, or like maybe rolling through it at a 15 mile per hour, way too fast. They're not stopping. So it was crazy because that intersection I was hit, being such a busy one, I was shocked there was no cameras. I feel like there should be some cameras at some of these major intersections. I think people need to possibly have a little more enforcement on stopping at stop signs, even because it's dangerous. If the kids are riding their bikes, to go through a stop sign that quick is shouldn't be the case. It's a stop sign for a reason. And so my daughter, being 16, just got her driver's license. And I feel like every time she's in the car with me, I'm reminding her different things she should look out for. And just like a few days ago, literally, we were stopped at another kind of busy intersection, Boulevard and South Quaker. And I stopped at a red light, and the person behind me, the light's already red, and I'm stopped in front of them, swerved around me and blew through the red light. So I just don't understand, like, why red lights don't seem to matter anymore to some people. But it needs to matter, because people are going to get hurt.
We've been talking with West Hartford resident Stephanie Marco Lance. She's a mixed media artist, and she's recounting for us what she experienced, her family experienced as well 5 years ago at the intersection of Farmington and Trout Brook. Stephanie, thank you for coming on, and we're glad that you're doing better today.
Thank you for having me.
This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Coming up after a break, we're going to hear from the town of West Hartford about an ongoing study to slow traffic between Bishop's Corner and West Hartford Center. Today, as we focus on pedestrian deaths rising in our state, also a national problem. Do you feel safe walking where you live? You can join us, 888-720-9677. That's 888-720-WNPR, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Connecticut's Highway Safety Office says pedestrian deaths in our state have more than doubled since 2011. And this year, there have been reports of at least 17 pedestrian-involved deaths. This data does not include 4 incidents over the last month, 2 in Hartford, 1 on I-91 North near North Haven, and in West Hartford, where a pedestrian on the sidewalk was hit and killed in the town center near North Main Street and Farmington Avenue. That crash is still under investigation, and the town of West Hartford cannot comment. But the town has been studying how to slow traffic. Joining us now on Zoom is Greg Sommer, who's West Hartford's town engineer. Greg, welcome to our show.
Hey, good morning, Lucy. Thanks for having me.
Our listeners can join as well, 888-720-9677. That's 888-720-WNPR, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. Greg, we played that interview from a West Hartford resident who was struck on the corner of Farmington Avenue and Trout Brook Drive 5 years ago. What was your reaction to what she shared?
Yeah, anytime we have a pedestrian, a vulnerable user involved in a crash, it always certainly, heightens our awareness. And as an engineering division, we're always working closely with our police department, making sure we follow up on those crashes to get a better understanding of exactly what happened, what were some of the contributing factors, and really take a good hard look to see if there's anything we could be doing differently out there. Hopefully to maybe correct that situation so that type of crash doesn't occur again.
That was 5 years ago. When we talk about that intersection, has the town made any changes? It's pretty heavily trafficked.
It is. It's one of our certainly our busier one of our busier intersections. Just on the outskirts of West Hartford Center. We are making improvements out there. We've recently with the Trumper Trail has just opened up in that area, so we're seeing some additional pedestrian use from that as well. So we're looking at shortening some of those crossing distances by realigning the crosswalks, adding new accessible sidewalk ramps, upgrading some of the pedestrian push buttons at that intersection, so that they have a audible and vibrotactile arrow on that button. So that helps not only for able-bodied pedestrians, but more so with those that might be like deaf or visually impaired, being able to safely navigate their way across the street. The buttons will actually say that the walk light is on, or they'll tell you that you need to wait. So that's been very well received by the community. In other areas where you have those pedestrian push buttons, those enhanced crossing features. So we're looking to bring it to that intersection in the near future as well.
What about driver behavior? We hear, anecdotes, people talking about, even Stephanie mentioning people blowing through red lights, not stopping at stop signs. She even mentioned, she'd like to see a camera at that intersection. How do you approach that?
It's a challenge because we're seeing that more and more, right? Drivers are obviously distracted. We see the aggressive behavior, as Stephanie had pointed out, in a recent experience she had. So yeah, certainly we're again working with the police department to step up in their enforcement efforts, trying to correct that. But it's a challenge. Certainly, they are looking at purchasing camera equipment to do some surveillance at some of our major intersections. I know that's one of the initiatives that the police department is currently working on. We've actually done something similar with a mobile traffic camera that we've recently purchased. We're able to deploy that for a couple days, but it gives us a way to observe the intersection or the specific traffic concern that we hear about. We'll be able to gather some information, especially if it occurs off peak or over the weekend, something like that. We can record that video data and then bring that in, watch it, and get an understanding of how traffic is moving through the area, and maybe pick up on an issue or concern that isn't really recognizable when you're standing out there.
You can join our conversation as we talk to West Hartford's town engineer, Greg Sommer, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. Since I mentioned again that you're a town engineer, what are some other ways when we think about how municipalities, design roads, ways that you can calm traffic? Because you can't get into the mind of every driver who's in a rush or distracted, but there are ways that you can design a road to make them slow down. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. Certainly narrowing the traffic, the travel lanes certainly help. There's a number of different tools that we have in our toolbox that help us as we're designing our roadways to really calm traffic. We've recently developed a neighborhood street traffic calming program. There's a number of towns that have developed these over the years. Really geared towards reducing vehicle speeds, calming traffic, improving pedestrian and bicycle facilities, all in an effort of improving safety, improving the environment and the neighborhood.
Ethan tweeted at Where We Live. He lives in the town of West Hartford and writes, West Hartford addresses bicycle pedestrian accommodations on each street as it paves, but there's not an overall plan for connected and protected travel bike lanes. Ethan says there's no vision for something better. How do you respond to that?
I'd have to disagree. I think we have a pretty robust, as part of our Complete Streets policy, which we adopted back in 2015. It includes a bicycle network plan where we actually highlight basically outline the type of facility that each roadway will be treated with when the time comes. Obviously, If we have planned road projects, that's the best opportunity to install new markings and add bike signage. So that's what we've been doing. I think we've made some great strides, especially the last 5 years or so, really bolstering our number of miles of bike lanes. We're up to about 25 miles of bike lanes in town, 53 miles of bike routes. And then we have some new multi-use trails that we're actively constructing now. So I think we've done a tremendous job, especially most recently within the last 5 years, of really developing our bicycle network.
Mm-hmm. You've mentioned the job that's been done, but even when I'm just curious if you've been hearing from town residents. A quick scan of Facebook groups, especially those who live in West Hartford. A lot of people are concerned about, again, driver behavior and not feeling safe walking, and so many people are drawn to West Hartford because of the amenities. It's billed as a walkable center, and so what more can be done? How do you respond to those concerns?
Well, one of the things that we're currently working towards is the West Hartford Center Infrastructure Master Plan. So we're in the process of hiring a consultant now that we'll work closely with. There'll certainly be a robust public outreach component to that project, but really kind of working to revitalize West Hartford Center, re-envision it, I should say, and looking at different options, ways to through the pandemic, I've done a pretty good job expanding the outdoor dining element, and I think that's been very well received by the community. So I think this master plan initiative would look at ways of making that a little bit more permanent, expanding potentially the pedestrian sidewalk areas, so that it again you're highlighting the pedestrian features through the center. And it's in an effort to calm traffic. So I think that's really something that you'll see in the center over the next couple of years as we work through that and implement improvements, especially on LaSalle and on Farmington Avenue in West Hartford Center.
Mm. When we think about that road diet study that's been underway to calm traffic and busy points in town, Kate tweets that municipalities need to be more transparent about traffic studies. What exactly are you looking at and why? And there should be a quick turnaround. Shared results and goals for outcomes also important. And so how do you factor all that in terms of communicating with your town residents?
Sure. So for those listeners that might not be aware, we have been going through a North Main Street road diet study. It's been going on for several years now. Most recently, we've actually implemented a trial. So on North Main Street, major north-south route through town, basically from the center up through Bishop's Corner, we basically took the 4-lane section of roadway and reduced that. So it's a single lane in each direction with a center 2-way left turn lane. So what that has allowed us to do is to create shoulders, pull traffic closer to the center of the roadway, and really enhance the pedestrian and bicyclist environment. And we've heard some great comments from our residents. We've done a couple of public surveys online, which have been really well. Great responses comments came out of those surveys. We've had a couple of public info meetings just to listen to our residents and our community and hear their input. I think we've gotten some very valuable feedback from that. And, we're looking forward to very shortly here making a final decision, with that trial, whether it remains in place or if we revert back. But no, I think it's been pretty well received by the community, and it's certainly a benefit for our vulnerable users.
You're hearing Greg Sommer here on Where We Live. He's West Hartford's town engineer. He'll stay with us. And after the break, we're going to take your calls if you're holding. Here's the number, 888-720-9677. That's 888-720-WNPR. We're also going to talk to the Connecticut Department of Transportation. More after a short break. This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. We're talking about driver behavior, also transportation planning, two factors that impact the safety of roads and streets in local communities. Pedestrian deaths in our state have more than doubled in the last decade. What's your response when you hear that? You can join us, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. With us on Zoom is Greg Sommer, who's the town engineer in West Hartford. Joining us now is the Deputy Commissioner in the Connecticut Department of Transportation, Garrett Eucalitto. Garrett, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Lucy.
I've mentioned that statistic a few times, pedestrian deaths more than doubling in our state since 2011. I'm wondering if you can talk about this from the view of the DOT and, the efforts that need to happen to, really lower this troubling statistic.
Yeah, when we're looking at the fatality numbers and also the serious injury numbers that are occurring, it's really alarming to all of us at the Connecticut DOT as to what's occurring on our roadways. And we know that dangerous driver choices are the primary cause or contributing factor in probably 70% of the pedestrian fatalities that are occurring. And that's why it's been a significant focus for many years here at DOT, but also in the legislature. Back in 2021, Representative Roland Lamar in the Connecticut General Assembly championed some legislation that we worked with him on that tried to address a lot of those factors that can contribute to fatalities for pedestrians. So efforts to reduce speed limits or reduce speeds of the drivers, creating some new pedestrian safety zones, improving visibility for pedestrians at crosswalks, but also establishing a statewide Vision Zero Council. The next meeting is actually later today. So it is a kind of a holistic approach to try and address driver behavior, but we also know we have to address street designs, we have to increase education, and we have to increase enforcement efforts. And so it's not just one approach to try and address this, but it's a multi-pronged effort that we're going to need to continue to work on with partners across the state and across the nation.
You mentioned street design. Anthony tweeted, big SUVs and vanity trucks are certainly a safety issue. DOT doesn't control that, but it does control design standards for state routes. And he writes, the agency refuses to stripe bike routes, install sidewalks, or put in crosswalks. Meanwhile, pedestrian deaths are rising. Can you respond to that and talk about, from the state perspective, looking at state routes, when we look at street design, what can you do differently?
Yeah, I would say we are making significant efforts to try and improve the design of our roadways. Here on the Berlin Turnpike, which I wouldn't say is a pedestrian-friendly roadway, it's where the DOT headquarters is. We're in the process of installing crosswalks at all the intersections. And while there are not sidewalks, there at least will be crosswalks with pedestrian signal heads for individuals to cross. We have multiple efforts underway to do what are called road diets across the state to try and reduce the lane width, increase shoulders, and make it a little bit safer for bikers and pedestrians in those corridors by slowing drivers down through those corridors. And one of the other big pushes we have right now is fairly new in Connecticut, but it's very common around the world and across the country, which is roundabouts. Some places, they call them rotaries. Here, they're a little bit different. They're called roundabouts. We have over 20 of them under design across the state. They have been proven to significantly reduce crashes and fatalities and slow down driver speeds, not slowing down their total travel time to get to where they're going. But when you eliminate that traffic signal and replace it with a roundabout, you're going to slow down their speed through that corridor, which makes it safer for everyone. And so those are just some of the work we're doing, but we're working with local governments too. We have a program called the Community Connectivity Grant Program, where we're funding local efforts to make improvements to their roadways. We've awarded over 100 grants in the past few years, totaling over $38 million. And then we also have other programs in which are called the Local Transportation Capital Improvement Program, very long name. but some award-winning projects that are really improving safety across our state. One of the community connectivity grant programs, it was actually in Stamford. It's called Boxer Square. It won a national award for efforts to improve safety for pedestrians, slow down traffic, and make it safer for all users in that intersection area.
You're hearing Garrett Eucalitto here on Where We Live. He's the Deputy Commissioner for the State Department of Transportation as we talk about driver behavior and the importance of transportation planning, road design to help improve safety. You can join us, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. I wanted to bring in another perspective. Carrie Provost is joining us on the phone. Carrie, welcome to Where We Live.
Hi.
You're a Hartford resident and a blogger, and you wrote a pretty scathing piece about that latest fatal West Hartford crash that killed 61-year-old Bob O'Neill. You spoke about your experience getting him from point A to point B and why you're so concerned about driver behavior and road design. Can you tell us a little bit about your thoughts here?
Yeah, so I thought I was actually being very gentle in what I wrote. I've been mapping Connecticut pedestrian and cyclist fatalities for a few years and have done paid and unpaid work on transportation safety issues. So I know from a logic perspective, from what data tells me, and instinctively from experience when a road or intersection has been designed poorly and in a way that will have serious consequences. And that's what we call it. These are consequences. Bad design stemming from a lack of political will has results. And since 2015, West Hartford has had several preventable pedestrian fatalities. The one thing they've had in common is that they're all on roads designed to allow vehicles to move at high rates of speed. And as you know, the faster someone is driving, the less chance a pedestrian has of surviving that collision. So maybe a week before the preventable fatal collision in West Hartford Center, I was standing at the corner of that intersection, Farmington and Main, waiting for the pedestrian light to give me permission to cross so I could catch the bus back to Hartford. And I realized that West Hartford requires people to push the beg button here to get the light. This is at an intersection that always has pedestrians waiting to cross. And it felt insulting. Drivers get the light automatically, but humans outside of cars in the town center have to put in a special request to cross the street legally. And then if you're going from the Chipotle side of the road to the bus back to Hartford side, it will take you at least 2 light cycles if you cross legally. That's a ridiculous thing to ask of pedestrians. Why is our time less valuable? Why is the intersection so wide it cannot be crossed in 30 seconds? This is the town center, a place where we've been told it's walkable. Is it? There's nothing wrong with where the bus stops are. The problem is the intersection with the sheer number of lanes that makes what should be a pleasant area resemble a traffic sewer. So when I heard that a driver struck and killed Bob O'Neill, I was not at least surprised where this happened, but I was angry because the design that makes simple mobility inconvenient for pedestrians also allows drivers to reach unsafe speeds, making collisions more serious and, in this case, fatal. So I was asked, why did I write this open letter? And I have a number of reasons, but I'll just talk about 3. And it's the letters to the town of West Hartford, elected and appointed members of government. And I wanted those who make decisions about road design, from the engineers to those who create budgets, to hear that it's not okay to keep dragging their feet on revising past design mistakes. I'm not a random outraged member of the public. I've worked on these issues, and the knowledge about design influencing driver behavior is not new. Any town or city that prioritizes the safety of its residents and visitors will have already begun making significant improvements to its most dangerous areas. West Hartford has not done this. I wanted to spell out that there are temporary, less expensive design fixes. Those in office, I'm assuming, know this, but the general public might not realize there are interim changes that can be made. A tight budget is no excuse for inaction. And then really the thing that kind of drove me over the edge was anyone that uses the phrase thoughts and prayers is going to hear about it. And that's what the town of West Hartford offered. Thoughts and prayers combined with a traffic advisory when a human was killed. Nobody's paying municipal employees to pray, especially when road design is within the realm of things they actually have the ability to fix. You can't allow conditions for fatal crashes and then offer thoughts and prayers as if the matter was out of your control. It wasn't an earthquake. It was road design. So I thought I was being very gentle in what I wrote, considering that these are all known issues and that these are all things that people have had the ability to change.
And the town engineer from West Hartford is still on with us, Greg Sommer. Thank you, Carrie, for walking us through the points you raised in that piece. Greg, did you want to respond to Carrie's concerns as someone who is walking quite often in West Hartford?
Yeah, thank you, Lucy. And Carrie, I appreciate the commentary. And I can understand the frustration and it's incredibly unfortunate. And, anytime, like I mentioned, there's a crash, certainly if there's a fatality, it's something we take very seriously. And, we're going to look at that crash report once it comes out, once the police department is done investigating the incident, and we're going to look at it. But until then, until we have a full understanding of what happened, what the contributing factors were, what played into it, we're not going to rush to judgment. I think it's important that we follow the process and we get it right, and that it is going to take a little bit of time, but it's always something that we're gonna look at and take seriously.
And when pedestrians do push the button to cross, do they have enough time to cross? How do you gauge how much time is needed for people who, there's many people with, different mobility in terms of how to get across when we know that cars are, those are very busy intersections for many of us who drive through there.
Yep, absolutely. And that's one of the things, there's design standards. Based on the distance that you're crossing, we will calculate exactly how much time is needed. It's based on a walking speed of 3.5 feet per second, which is able to accommodate even some that might move a little bit slower than an able-bodied person. So that's all built into the timings of the traffic signal. At many of our intersections, especially in the center, we have what's called an exclusive pedestrian phase. Which means all traffic is stopped and the pedestrians have the clear right of way where there's no moving traffic. In other locations and other towns, they operate a concurrent ped phase, which the traffic is moving in the same direction as the pedestrians. So there's pros and cons to both, but especially in areas where there's a heavy volume of pedestrian traffic, like in the center, it's worked out well with the exclusive pedestrian phases that we have.
You can join us 888-720-9677 or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. Garrett was calling in from East Hampton. Garrett, what did you want to share?
Hi, I wanted to share the fact that I was born and raised in Iceland, so I spent half of my life in Scandinavia. And the other half here in the States, and the approach is so drastically different when it comes to how we treat just traffic in general. And sort of the biggest point I would like to make is I feel like this whole conversation is about treating the symptoms of the problem as opposed to the cause, and the cause being just lack of early education. When in Iceland, a preschooler is taught how to cross the street, and you're taught to help the driver to see you, and so you're being made aware that you also contribute into the traffic pattern, whether you're a pedestrian, a bicyclist, or if you drive a car, and there are certain things like what they're saying, common sense is the problem with common sense is it's uncommon. So. For me, every time I see pedestrians or bicyclists going with traffic as opposed to against traffic, it just bewilders me, because as a pedestrian, or if you're on a bike, if you're going with traffic, that means you're putting your life in the hands of the driver that's coming, often speeding up behind you, and all it takes is a bee getting into the car or some sort of distraction, just a moment of distraction, and that's it. You're trusting the fact that the person driving is not going to be distracted, and I think distraction is only going to get worse from now on in, and until we figure that one out. It's about teaching preschoolers and children how to behave in traffic and making sure, like your guest earlier, Stephanie mentioned that now she teaches her daughter to wait to see if someone is going to stop at the red light or not. I mean, that's what we should always be doing, always second guess.
Yeah, but you're also putting a lot. You're also putting a lot on pedestrians and bicyclists to follow the rules. You know, part of this is also driver behavior, and that's something that Garrett Eucalitto from the State Department of Transportation has also stressed. Garrett, I wanted to get back to you when we talk about the issue of walkability. So many people in our state who ride buses and how they need to get from point A to point B, including walking. I'm wondering if you can talk about that.
Yeah, I think what will surprise a lot of people listening today is that prior to COVID, we had almost as many bus trips occur in our state as we did commuter rail trips in our state. I think it was around 39 million bus trips and 40 million rail trips. Frequently, if you don't use a bus, you may not often think about it, but it is such a vital tool and resource for everyone who relies on it. It expands economic mobility, gets them to the grocery store, the drugstore, brings them to school, to work, and other social activities. But taking the bus, you need a safe place to wait for that bus, a safe place to get off the bus, and then you need to be able to walk or bike to your destination, that last mile concept. So that is definitely something that, we at the Connecticut DOT are trying to work on. We are hoping to roll out a new program later this year to do a statewide improvement program of all of the bus shelters and bus stops statewide to provide them with the dignity they deserve as transit users. But those sidewalks connecting to those shelters, getting them where they need to go is really critical. They also need to be able to safely cross the street to the other side when they get off that bus. One of the efforts that was in the legislation in 2021 is making sure that pedestrians no longer have to actually be in the crosswalk for a vehicle to yield for them. Now they just have to indicate their desire to cross. Which is, a concept I don't think before I came back to Connecticut, I didn't realize that the law said I actually had to be in the crosswalk for a vehicle to yield to me. So that is a small but subtle change that can help raise visibility for drivers as to what their responsibility is for everyone trying to get around in our state.
You can join us 888-720-9677 or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. Richard was calling in from Manchester. Richard, if you're still there, tell us what you wanted to share.
I happen to be a crossing guard, and obviously I do see a lot of things. I'm on a street that in an hour and a half, over 700 vehicles go by, and I've done my own little survey. And there are signs showing speed limit that says 25 miles per hour. It's a school area. People are reversing the 25 and they're doing 52. I think education is very, very important at an early age. I have signs where people can press and the flashing light. And I would say 8 out of 10 cars will go right through it. I sometimes have to point to it. And I even tell people as they're crossing, don't assume a car will stop. The gentleman that just prior spoke about people just going a little bit into it. Either people are not aware of that law or they just blow right through it. And another observation that I have, once motorists feel that pedestrians are not an inconvenience to them, then I think things will change. That they have to put themselves in the shoes of the pedestrians. The street that I'm on, it's Spruce Street, it runs parallel with Main. There's only 4 traffic lights. Main Street has 10, and it's a major kind of speedway to get on to 384. So there's a lot of factors there. The police do cruise around, but they need to be there, and consequences. There's no consequences for people if it was known that, yes, you do this and you're going to be ticketed or so, maybe that would. But I guess they just can't chase cars, and there's accidents that happen at least once a week on the street. Emergency
Thank you.
vehicles.
I'm going to have the guests respond. Richard, thank you for sharing that. I'll go back to you, Garrett Eucalitto, with DOT. Richard stressing consequences. I wonder if you can weigh in there.
He raised a great point. Like I said earlier, there's it's a multi-pronged approach to getting, to improving safety on our roadways. Enforcement is one of those. And one of the things that we have seen nationally, one of the most effective tools is automated traffic enforcement. New York City has speed cameras near their schools, and it has drastically reduced speeding near those schools and improved safety for the children and their families who are walking to and from school every day. They've just received legislative approval to continue that program. It was a pilot program. We at the DOT, while school zone cameras are not legal in Connecticut, in fact, no automated traffic enforcement is legal in Connecticut. We did receive legislative approval to use speed cameras as a pilot in our work zones on the highways. We hopefully will be rolling that pilot out later this year. And we hope to use the results from that pilot to show the efficacy of automated traffic enforcement to drastically reduce speeds, improving safety for people, whether you are on a local road or on an interstate highway.
I believe Richard mentioned Main Street, and we did get a comment from Rick on Facebook. He talks about part of the problem is related to how the state manages main streets. He writes, many of our main streets are state highways designed to be wide and straight with no obstructions. So they're auto-oriented, not at all friendly to pedestrians, and they've also ruined the character of our town centers. Could you respond to that, Garrett?
I think that's a valid point. Back several decades ago, the state had responsibility for these roadways, and the focus for all of those communities and for the state DOT and state government at the time was getting people quickly to their jobs in urban centers and then getting them home in the evening. That approach has changed here at ConnDOT, and I think that approach has changed locally as well. And so we are making improvements. It can't happen all at once, but as part of our comprehensive pedestrian safety strategy we released last year, we've identified efforts that we're going to go out and look at how we can improve safety in those community centers where a state road passes through a community center. How can we improve or reduce speeds through those communities? And we are doing several things, like I mentioned, road diets through those communities, improving pedestrian infrastructure, trying to improve crosswalks and flashing beacons. So it is something that is going to take time, but we recognize that those decisions of the past 30, 40 years ago, and without county governments here in Connecticut, it's fallen on ConnDOT to manage those state roads across the state. But it is something that we're going to continue to address with our local partners.
You've been hearing Garrett Eucalitto here on Where We Live. Again, he's Deputy Commissioner of the State Department of Transportation. Thank you, Garrett. Also to Carrie Provost for calling in, a Hartford resident and blogger, and West Hartford Town Engineer Greg Sommer. Thank you also to listeners for your social media comments. We couldn't get to all the calls, but we appreciate the engagement on this important topic. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Today's show produced by Katie Pellico. We'll be back tomorrow.
Give a gift to Connecticut Public